Have you ever noticed that there's not even a word for the male version of a slut? On the other hand, the ways to describe a promiscuous female are endless. Slut, whore, tramp, prostitute, and many more with equally negative connotations. So why do ladies take all the heat? Women are animal creatures just as men, and therefore undergo the same biological experiences. At some point, though, society decided this was improper for a lady. So, females have to live in a world that restricts them from actually expressing themselves. But the one saving grace is art. Art is a means of human expression that embraces those thoughts, feelings, and desires which we are not allowed to talk about, that which must not be named, like Voldemort. Art transforms these urges into songs or ballets or paintings, or literature. Writing will often recognize and address how such biological tendencies interplay in the day-to-day. The Awakening by Kate Chopin does just this. Chopin constructs a story about a young female who is married with kids at the end of the 19th century. The main character, Edna Pontier, is awakened to her animal desires which prompt her to interact with younger men and eventually leave her family. Pretty much all of Edna's actions defy convention and appall her fellow society. But when one considers the biology that is motivating Edna, her actions become much more understandable. The theory of evolution and sexual selection help elucidate Edna's character, whereas initially she seemed irrational. So, biology gives us a greater insight into the story, while the literature connects us to our own biology. In this way, literature and biology interact mutualistically to help explain the female experience. In science, a mutualistic relationship refers to an interaction between two organisms in which both benefit. The classic example is that of a flower and a hummingbird. The flower provides sweet sustenance for the hummingbird, while the hummingbird helps the pollination process for the flower. In much the same way, biology provides sustenance for art, and art delves into the biology. To illustrate this point, we will take a deeper look into the happenings of the Awakening to better understand Edna's behavior. For instance, when Edna leaves her husband to engage with younger men, her behavior is criticized by both characters and readers. Her actions violate our perceptions of marriage, that a person commits to another and they stay together for the rest of their lives. But, biologically speaking, marriage does not make sense, and humans are one of the only species with such a ritual. In fact, most animals have multiple sexual partners. Evolution is all about surviving, so we are hardwired to want to procreate. Thus, we are subject to the whims of desire, also known as hormones. Edna's flirtations and sexual behavior are just the physical display of her body's chemical persuasions. Arabin, one of Edna's younger love interests, kisses her late one night, and she describes it as the first kiss of her life to which her nature had really responded. It was a flaming torch that kindled desire. She goes on to explain that it was not the kiss of love that had inflamed her, because it was not love which had held this cup of life to her lips. This passage indicates that she's not driven by love, but just the carnal desire of lust. Lust is an uncontrollable sexual desire, purely biological. Therefore, we cannot blame Edna for experiencing a normal sexual reaction in which we ourselves can most likely relate. It becomes even more understandable when you consider who she is kissing. All of Edna's escapades occur with young men, such as Arabin and Robert. Based on the theory of sexual selection, the female in the species is almost always attracted to the male who can ensure her youth the best chance of survival, the robust, attractive, healthy young men. So at first glance, Edna appears like a loose woman. But upon closer inspection, we see that Edna is attracted to young men who are not her husband because she is evolutionarily designed to be. Another deceiving characteristic of Edna is her indifference towards her children. It is considered strange and unnatural to many of the people around her. Edna's husband, Leon, notes her tough love attitude towards the kids and reproaches his wife with her inattention and her habit of neglect of the children. Edna is later described as not a mother woman. She was fond of her children in an uneven, impulsive way. She would sometimes forget them. But just because Edna does not fit the role of a mother deemed acceptable by society does not mean she falls short from an evolutionary standpoint. In nature, very few parents are involved in their offspring's lives. A mother may be a womb for a period of development or may build a nest for eggs, but once the young are born, moms generally don't stick around much longer. Natural selection means survival of the fittest. And Edna's lack of attention to her kids is just because she is more focused on meeting her own needs. In this light, Edna's character becomes much more sympathetic. So, through the lens of natural selection, we can better understand this story. At the same time, the story recognizes how biology affects our actions. It does this by pointing to the fact that we are biologically driven by impulses that are conducive to our survival, but this is not always politically correct. Literature is not the only art form that makes this statement. All kinds of art loves to dabble in this water. Love, lust, desire, it's what great art is made of. It can be found in a violent brushstroke or a passionate choreography, or perhaps the sensuous melodies of a musical piece. In fact, music is what first awakens Edna's dormant spirit. One evening, a talented pianist is called to play, and the experience proves incredibly moving for Edna. The first chord struck upon the piano sent a keen tremor down Miss Pontier's spinal column. Perhaps it was the first time her being was tempered to take an impress of the abiding truth. Art is a way to express the unadulterated feelings within us. Art is truth. Therefore, it makes sense why Edna would respond so strongly to the music, because it allows her to feel her true, unadulterated self. Also, based on sexual selection, beautiful songs and pretty images are supposed to attract females because it can lead to mating. It's hardwired within the female gender to respond to art forms. For Edna, the music evoked solitude, hope, longing, and despair, and aroused within her soul, swaying it, lashing it, as the waves daily beat upon her splendid body. In this passage, she is connecting to her basic primitive desires. Later, Edna starts focusing on her painting as another outlet for her artistic energy. Her husband declares that it seems the utmost folly for a woman at the head of a household and the mother of children to spend an atelier days which would better be employed contriving for a family. In light of her other responsibilities, Edna's employment in the art appears foolish to her husband and to society. But Edna's interest in art makes sense biologically because it is an extension of her own natural desires. Much of how Edna conducts herself spits in the face of what society deems as appropriate female behavior for a wife and for a mother. But through a scientific standpoint, Edna fits the female role. She acknowledges her desires in a singularly focused survival of the fittest kind of way. By evaluating the novel through the context of science and evolution, we can sympathize, understand, and relate to Edna as a symbol for our own animal urges and actions. We are reminded that we are not free from our own biology just because we have created a society that attempts to ignore it. In this way, The Awakening is an example of how literature and biology feed off of each other to explain the plight of female sexuality. So, the next time you hear a girl called a slut, just consider that she is simply at the biological mercy of lust.